The Daddy Letters. Season 2. Letter 38. Culture versus Tradition. Part 2.
Dear son of Abraham, in my last letter, I ended by naming key philosophers who have been instrumental in changing culture, and I highlighted the ones that are responsible for moving us into this philosophical period of relativism, which is the belief that there are no absolute truths by which we may know ourselves. I also identified the university system as the sanctioned institutional forum from which these philosophers proffer their philosophical ideas, in a stream of intellectual and social learnings to which we are obligated to comply. Society appoints philosophers to be its gods, and gives them power to create and transform culture. Society grants them authority over the minds of citizens, to define how we should see ourselves, what it means to be human, and what it means to be moral. From their academic thrones, philosophers postulate what is right, and what is wrong, and save us from the tiresome effort of analysis. We prefer that they do the hard work of thinking for us, as long as they tell us what we want to hear, and give us permission to do what our impulses demand. They become our Zeuses, Apollos, Poseidons, and Athenas, presiding over the ethos of society from the Mount Olympus of the university system. The spider's web of higher learning blankets the globe with the silken philosophical fibers of culture, trapping entire societies into its academically derived, and peer-review sanctioned, ways to think, believe, learn, decide, choose, and view the world in common with their fellow citizens. These philosophies permeate every level of society, including societal agencies such as mental health, corporations, community services organizations, and religious organizations. The power of the educational system must not be underestimated. It exerts formidable force to shape society. The educational system, from universities all the way down to kindergarten, teaches members of society how to reason, what to think, and believe. If you control what people think, you inevitably will control what they do, because doing proceeds from thinking. Just as false prophets can misguide God's people, false philosophers can misguide society's people. Look at how Hitler misguided an entire nation, turning Germans into genocidal fanatics with perfectly clear consciences. Wherever there is great power to do good, rulers of darkness find ways to twist it into evil and destructive uses, and that is what happens in our educational system. Christian parents, and church leaders alike, must prepare the young for the vicious onslaught that will be launched against their souls, in halls of learning. In the 1930s, fueled by the teachings of Kierkegaard and other disciples of Hegel, the university system, in concert with educational systems of lower learning, began to shift cultural thinking into existential relativism, which is the belief that there are no absolute truths. Before then, rationalism was the accepted philosophical system for discerning truth, when it was widely accepted that there are absolute truths from which we may gain knowledge of ourselves. However, relativism is in full tilt today, and beginning to produce a level of anarchy in the social order and religion. Philosophical norms of the day roll downhill to influence the other four categories of sanctioned cultural institutions, art being the next level down. Art is informed by philosophy, and therefore artists, such as Picasso, strive to produce artistic expressions of cultural philosophies. Picasso is well known for using art to communicate non-absolutism, and in so doing, he produced sometimes seemingly grotesque images, but proposed them to be beautiful. In non-absolutism, beauty is whatever you want it to be. Artistic expression shows up in many forms of entertainment. The rocketing rise of pornography demonstrates the narcissistic and nihilistic thinking of our day. Defacing private and public property with graffiti. A tide of movies presenting polyamory as a desirable lifestyle. And many other art forms express the growing public acceptance of relativist philosophies. As people become more immersed in the art of societal culture, they learn to live by the philosophies these artistic expressions teach, and the beliefs they generate. Several societal institutions govern artistic cultural expression. Some are art galleries, movie studios, publishing houses, music producers, and museums. These institutional agencies are dedicated to artistic expression as a way to indoctrinate our citizenry with philosophies and beliefs that establish cultural norms. According to Schaeffer, the music industry is the next level down from art, as a cultural control. Music is a very potent purveyor of culture, and is almost ubiquitous in its presence. From car radios, to computers, electronic music players, and televisions, music surrounds, and engulfs us with its onboard cultural commentary and philosophies. The messages in the lyrics, subconscious absorption of the meaning in the sounds, rhythms, and melodies, all combine to teach us what the group mind of culture thinks, and accepts as true, and good. The music industry, through its many producers, and music labels, is the institution that governs the musical messages that dominate the ears and psyche of societies. Next, we roll down the hill of cultural controls from art and music, to general culture, which can be described as the complex network of societal agencies, industries, and social interactions, that define expected behaviors, and practices, and purvey common cultural knowledge. The cultural institutions governing general culture are too many to name, but examples are, the fashion industry, food industry, advertising industry, technology industry, healthcare system, transportation industry, charitable organizations, and others. Everywhere, these general institutions and agencies draw us into ways of thinking, seeing ourselves, seeing each other, pursuing happiness, and so on, in ways that are in concert with the philosophical framework that prevails. Remember, philosophy rolls downhill. At the bottom of the cultural controls hill is theology, which is the study of the nature of God and religious beliefs. Seminaries and religious denominational boards are among the controlling institutions for theology. Modern theology is quickly adopting the current relativism, and is beginning to dismiss the authority of Scripture. Because relativism is taking hold in religion, many theological collisions take place between Christian apologists, who maintain that Scripture contains absolute truths, and theologians who reject that supposition. In theological circles today, definitions of truth are increasingly many, varied, and often contradictory. Society has no commonly shared measures for right and wrong. In this atmosphere, every person is considered free to conceive of the God he wants to worship, and how to worship him, or her. Some forsake the belief in God as a person, and choose instead to believe that God is our living universe, a belief system called pantheism. People are becoming overwhelmed by the large number of cultural immersion points that constantly, and sometimes subliminally generate torrents of messages that are contradictory to rational Christian beliefs. No wonder it is so difficult to get people to see the beauty of God's kingdom culture in this era of confusion, because relativism is a philosophical framework that makes God's kingdom culture seem foolish. Bad philosophy is like a splash of acid to the eyes. It blinds the human mind, and blocks out any light of truth that might be contrary to what the hands and walking stick knows. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 4 through 6 talks about how cultural gods and institutional deities make the mind impenetrable to light.
In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we proclaim is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, with ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ.
Today, we are challenged to take the gospel to people who are predisposed to dismiss it, because it does not fit into their philosophical framework of relativism. What's worse is, that few people are even aware of why they think the way they do, therefore making it difficult to even discuss their methods of discerning truth. They have unconsciously absorbed, and begun practicing ways of thinking, and believing, that they have been soaked in, from the flood of upstream messages released from sanctioned institutions that control culture. In this atmosphere, it is very easy to find yourself in a discourse without a common language. Young man, this is the challenge you face as a rising leader in God's kingdom culture. Your task will be far more complicated, and challenging, than what I faced when I was your age. I will pick up in a later letter to continue this huge discussion. Before I close, I am going to take the liberty to give you some advice. I heard my daughter was bragging to you about a new recipe she came up with for a cheese apple pie, and you refused to try it, because you couldn't imagine cheese on, or in, an apple pie. I hope you remember that I wrote to you that my daughter, your girlfriend, is as strong as a climbing rope, and as shrewd as a used car salesman? Well, she is both, and I would advise you to give in, and give her recipe a try, because she won't give up until you do. So save yourself a lot of grief. Besides, I think you might be surprised how good it tastes. I find it a very tasty apple pie variation. You are fortunate to have a woman who creatively brings variety to her apple pies, because that is a sign that she will likely bring that same spirit of creativity into the rest of your relationship. So, if you encourage her creativity now, by enthusiastically trying her cheese apple pie, she will be encouraged to be creative later, in other areas of greater interest to you. After all, the worst thing that could happen is you won't like it, but even then, you should still express how impressed you are with her adventurous nature. I'm just looking out for you, young man. Take care. Ruel.